Good morning. Well, I know there's a number of folks probably joining us online as well, so we'll say good morning to them as well. But let me go ahead and get started. My name is Eric Monday, and I serve as the Executive Vice President for Finance and Administration here at the university. And let me say a few words of introduction before we turn it over to our team from Sasaki and give us a little bit of a background of where we are. So this is the second round of forums for our Transportation Master Plan. And as we've said from the beginning, our real goal is access, mobility to and from, and it's more than just looking at one element of transportation, right? We're going to try to look at all of those elements, so it's just not a focus on parking, if you will. It's on truly transportation. Many of you have been engaged in this process for a number of months, and we appreciate that engagement, and we want that to continue as we look towards the future. Let me give you a quick overview of the process to date. Building on the data collection and analysis that we did in 2013 and 2014 regarding our transportation and parking needs, we engaged Sasaki in December, just last December, to help us integrate our transportation plan within our master plan. And for those of you who may not recall, Sasaki and Associates played a central role and led that process for our master plan. At the same time, we have launched a web page where the campus could provide information and find out information about the process. In January, Andy, who's back with us today, and we'll hear from him in just a moment, facilitated 2 open forums focused on guiding principles in the broad context. And really, we spent a great deal of time talking about the challenges or the problems that we're facing, and we're going to transition today to talk a little bit more about the solutions. We also then launched a survey with the University of Kentucky Transportation Center. We've now received over 5,000 responses to this survey, just a tremendous amount of feedback. All of this information and feedback, the forums, email communications, web feedback, and the survey has been thoroughly reviewed, considered, integrated as appropriate, and will be reflected in what we hear from Andy in just a few moments. So why are we here today? We're here to hear an update, but at the same time, we're here to continue that feedback cycle. We're not finished. We're still within the process, and we want to engage everyone in this room, everyone online, and through other mediums as we go through this process. I think sometimes we get maybe discouraged because of the challenges we're facing in transportation on the campus, but let's look at that from a different angle and a different view as well. We are now in the midst of $1.7 billion of campus transformation in less than 4 years, and I consider that to be a great thing. And it's a challenge, and one that we recognize and one that we are going to work to fix and improve, and that's why we're here today. And so that improved experience, what is the end in mind, that outcome for us is improved communication, it's better real-time information, it's a more predictable parking experience, it's more choices about how you get to and how you get around the campus. It's reliable and predictable transit. It's enhanced alternatives so you don't have to drive a car every day to the campus. So I hope today that we can continue in this dialogue. And now let me turn it over to Andy from Sasaki, who's going to walk us through. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric, and thank you all for coming. We had a good trip down from Boston last night, unlike last time, and so I'm accompanied today by 2 folks who have been instrumental to the planning process from our side. Greg Havens is the principal in charge on this project, was also principal in charge on the campus master plan, knows the campus inside out, and has been very focused on making sure that the transportation plan really supports the wider agenda, initiatives, and priorities of the university. Also with us is Margot Sulmont, who's a planner, who's done a lot of work on the parking side. I'm going to ask her to tell you a little about best practices based on case studies from around the country. So she'll step up for a minute. As Eric said, we're sort of picking up where we left off. But in the 2 months since we saw you last, we have made a lot of progress, done a lot of work in terms of research and analysis. I'm going to lead you through some of that today with the goal of coming to a common understanding of the problems and of a broad policy initiative to deal with them. So I'm going to start out by going through some of the survey results of the survey that Eric mentioned. Then we'll talk about the concept of transportation demand management, what it means to basically to give people alternatives to driving alone to work and around the campus. Then we'll talk about parking, what we know about the supply and demand relationship here on campus, what opportunities we might have to increase the parking supply and conversely to reduce demand. We'll talk about how other universities do it, first in the sort of abstract in terms of permitting and allocation models. I'm going to say a little about parking pricing, but I want to emphasize that given the high level of analysis that we're at now, and given, as you'll see, that there's a lot of material to cover here, we have set this up to be a discussion about parking policy and the models of parking allocation. This is not about how much you're going to pay for permits next year or even the year after. That is to be determined based on the outcome of these meetings and the feedback we get. We hope to move forward with a proposed policy direction that I'll describe to you, but it will not be about how much it costs to park for any particular population or in any particular location. The presentation today will talk in fairly general terms, and so when we talk about pricing, I'd like you to kind of try and detach from thinking about how much is this going to cost me next year, but think of pricing as an indicator of value, as a marker of the convenience, the location, the quality, the timing of the various services and facilities that we use for transportation here. So, for instance, we'll talk about, is it a good idea to charge less for less convenient parking than for more convenient parking? We're going to keep it at that level, but I just don't want people to interpret any of what I'm going to show as indicating any decisions about the absolute price of parking. We are coming to that. We'll be working very hard over the next couple of months, but today we're just going to kind of try and explain the dynamics here and decide how to structure the system in a big way. So we will show you some case studies from other universities and what they indicate about these potential policy directions. On the transit side, we'll do a somewhat similar overview. We'll look at how LexTrans serves the campus. We'll look at how CATS, the campus transit system, works and how it can be improved. I will talk very briefly about traffic operations, mostly to say, and I guess I'll just say it now, that since we are looking at these big sort of policy and operational questions, a lot of the questions about campus circulation, how traffic is managed on the campus, really are dependent on our solutions in terms of transit and parking policy. So for that reason, we are not actually going to talk about, for instance, closing Rose Street or managing traffic on Woodland and Hilltop, those sort of things. They are important, and I'm sure that we certainly welcome you to comment on them, but as you'll see, they are really the next step in this process. So finally, we're going to end with a discussion of our strategic direction recommendations, and that will become clear as we move through. First, though, just to sort of recap and throw out some ideas about what the system of transportation needs to accomplish here. We talked about most of this stuff before. It's important that users of the system know how long it's going to take them to get to a parking garage, to get out of a parking garage, to ride the bus. So predictability and confidence are really the key issues when it comes to a system that everybody can rely on. Likewise, orderly and smooth access and egress from parking facilities. We heard a lot about how long it takes to get out of garages and parking lots, and that is very important. As you'll see, and as I said, with regard to traffic, we're not really going to get into that, but these are important priorities for the system and for the plan as a whole. We talked last time about setting some sort of standards of what people should be able to expect from the transportation system in terms of travel times and the accessibility of facilities, and also what the system should expect from its users in terms of mostly willingness to walk a certain distance and how long you're willing to wait for buses and that sort of thing. And so we need to understand both what the system can provide and what it needs to work well. Transit is an important part of this solution, and so we need to make it work for people. We need to make it convenient, reliable, comfortable, all of the things that make it a good alternative to driving alone. We expect that daytime bus service should be convenient, and we're thinking in terms of headways of 10 minutes or less. Many buses run on 10-minute headways today, and that really is about as good as you can hope for in a system that runs a lot of buses. Too much shorter than that, and the buses start to bunch up. So a 10-minute headway is really a very high level of service. In the evening, we would expect that the service would be a little less frequent, maybe on 15-minute headways. Weekend and off-hours bus service is something that's not currently provided, but we heard in the comments that it would be a very valuable addition. And finally, I'm not, again, going to be talking about disability access today, but it is key to the success of this effort. As you'll see when we talk about the survey results. First of all, this is a very high-level summary of the written comments that were provided in connection with the survey that was sent out. There were 4 questions that asked for verbal responses. From the 5,000 people who answered as many as 4 questions, we got about 7,000 written verbal responses. We are plowing through them, and we will read every one of them. I've personally read about 2,000 of them so far, and that's the basis for this sort of distillation of the top issues. But we are very committed to reading every word that people have taken the time to write to us about this. Another thing to say is that in that raft of opinions, not everyone agreed. There are conflicting opinions. There are people who want parking to be free. There are people who want parking to be expensive in the core, so that the quality of the core is not compromised by too much vehicle traffic. We're not going to come up with a single solution that makes everybody happy because everybody doesn't agree. But we are trying to respond to the most important and legitimate concerns, and to take them into account as we develop a system that is feasible and functional. So, safety, egress from parking facilities. We can't solve all of those problems. We can solve some of them. A big thing that we heard and really did take to heart was that people are getting docked pay because they're late to work by 5 minutes because they can't find a parking space. That's something that really has got to be addressed. Parking prices, people care about them a lot one way or the other. Needs of employees with off-campus obligations, that is, if you leave in the middle of the day, you can't find your parking space when you get back. We have ideas about how to address that. Disability parking accommodations, as I said, these are very important. They absolutely have to be dealt with. That's not a matter of opinion, it's a matter of law. And we got a lot of comments about disability parking in its, or disability accommodations in their different forms. North Campus has a particular shortage of parking now. We recognize that. The quality of bus shelters and stops really is key to making the transit system attractive. The effect of medical center growth on ag school parking, which affects both populations. Pedestrian crossings, which is really a subcategory of safety, but it also has to do with sort of campus quality and the feeling of a pedestrian campus that people can freely walk around, which leads to the question of Rose Street. Interesting, a lot of opinions for and against restricting traffic. As I said, we are not there yet. We're not going to talk about that today, but it was great to hear the responses. We learned a lot from reading what people really experience day to day. And a lot of people had things to say about loading and service access. I will point out that of the survey responses, 3/4 of them came from employees, which means that they were in the overall somewhat overrepresented. But that's fine. We're taking that into account, and we take it as an indication of how much people care about transportation, and we appreciate your willingness to participate in this process. Now, I'm going to talk about some of the specific survey results with an eye to identifying the opportunities for redeveloping the parking and transportation system here. One of the key questions we asked relates to this triangle that we explained to you before. You can have cheap parking and convenient parking, but if it's cheap and convenient, there's not going to be enough of it. You can have cheap and plenty of parking, but if you have that, it's not going to be where you want it. It's not going to be convenient. And you can have plenty of convenient parking, but if you do, it's going to cost. That's just an iron law. We heard some comments last time, anything's possible, why are you saying that? It's not true, you can't have all three. And the example was, you could build underground parking in the campus core. That would be convenient and sufficient, but it wouldn't be cheap. You got to pay for that. So these are the realities that we deal with, and we're going to continue to come back to this device to explain how we're thinking of things. But when it comes to the survey, the interesting point here is that the survey indicated a broad support for changing the parking allocation system from what we have today, which, as I'll get into, is basically, as you all know, a hunting license that is not really much distributed or broken down between categories of user or location. And so less than half of people said that cost was their top priority, which suggests that supply and convenience are very important. And what that suggests is a more user-responsive model that gives people more choices so that if they're willing to pay more for convenient parking, they can do that. And that's really what we're going to keep coming back to. And not to give away the punchline, I'm going to develop an argument for a system that provides more choices, that has more distributed parking types across the campus so that people have more choice. Another way of looking at the survey responses to address this question is the question, indicate your level of agreement with different ideas about how to allocate and charge for parking. So we asked, how do people feel about the statement that there should be more permit categories to give users options with regard to price and location, that whole choice idea? And the response was pretty overwhelming. As you can see here, a pretty vast majority of all the respondents agreed with that statement, that there should be more user options with regard to price and location. As we go through other aspects of this same question, you'll see the same themes. When we ask the question a lot of different ways. Should price of permits reflect the convenience and desirability of parking? Yes. Should price of permits take into account ability to pay? Yes, meaning that you should be able to get less expensive parking if that's your priority. Should pay-as-you-go permits be more available? And by this, we meant, and we think people understood, the idea of permits that allow you to drive when you need to drive, but don't charge you for not driving when you don't drive. That is, some sort of permits that allow occasional use and charge you by the day, or have, for instance, a system that says you can park 30 times a semester, and that costs less than a permit that lets you park every day. These things that allow people to choose whether to drive or not, or to not pay if they only work here or have classes 2 or 3 days a week. Carpooling and ride sharing should also be incentivized. So there's a broad agreement from the survey results that the current system does not provide people enough choice, enough options, and that has really been our taking off point in developing our recommendations. Now, when we look at the sort of objective conditions of the parking system here, this is the supply picture. And it just goes for the next 4 years to look at what we know about how many spaces are going to be built and how many are going to be displaced or removed, mostly for specific development projects. So what you see is that in the next 2 years, we're going to actually be losing parking. About 1,000 spaces, actually last year, and another 900 or so this year. Next year, things are going to get better. We'll add back a good number of those spaces, and a little more in 2016. As I say, opportunities to create new parking haven't been projected out into the future, but we're going to talk about those opportunities. But now, looking at the demand side, what we've done here is taken the number of permits that are associated with each of these user groups, and as their populations change, the demand for permits goes up. So, for instance, you'll see that in the 2014-2015 year, there's going to be a decrease in the number of BCTC enrolled students getting permits. That's going to mitigate against the increase in demand that will come from healthcare employment, BCTC employment, and the increase in undergraduate beds on campus at the new residence halls. So you carry that through. The dots indicate the sort of net increase in parking demand as measured by the issuance of permits. When you put the supply and demand curves together is where you start to see the problem and the trends. The blue line recommends calculated demand, which is not the same as the actual occupancy of parking, which is shown by the red star. The difference has to do with the conditions of the parking system and how efficient and convenient it is. The blue curve represents the number of permits issued and factored by the sort of daily arrival or presence, as we call it, of people who hold those permits, and then adding in to that sort of estimated need what we would call a cushion or a search margin, which would guarantee that there's parking available in the facilities that you're looking in. So today we see that the actual occupancy is lower than that sort of ideal or calculated demand. And at the moment, it's just a few hundred spaces below total capacity. In the future, the demand is going to continue to go up in response to those population factors that I mentioned. Supply is going to go down and then back up. And so supply and demand are roughly keeping pace, but clearly we have a problem. As I said the first time I came, this is a pretty dire situation. You've got almost as many people showing up to park every day as you have parking spaces, and the result of that, as you know, is that people are hunting all over for parking, and that's part of the problem that we want to address. So how do we address this? Two ways: raise supply and mitigate demand. So I'm going to talk about those two sides together. On the supply side, we have a number of options. At this point, we're looking at everything that's on the table. Expanding existing lots, creating new lots, expanding existing garages, building new garages. We are, and the administration has been all along, systematically reviewing these opportunities, looking for ways to acquire more land for parking, and doing everything that needs to be done to try and ease the supply side of the equation. When we look at the demand side, we're talking about transportation demand management in all its varieties. And I'm just going to quickly suggest the range of options, the tools that are in the TDM toolbox. Residential policy, sort of the land use transportation relationship, getting more people living closer to campus, more people on campus, perhaps providing financial incentives for people to live close to campus so they don't have to drive. Improving the transit system, improving the walkability and the quality of the campus as a whole so that people don't mind walking as far. And that may seem like a small thing, but it's a big thing. It's really a big thing to make a 10-minute walk from a remote parking lot something pleasant rather than arduous. Vouchers and incentives. This has to do both with the transit and the parking side. How can we provide financial incentives for people to leave their cars at home, and just to readjust that decision equation. Ride sharing, getting more people into the cars that do come to campus. And finally, pricing policy, making sure that people are buying the kind of parking that they want and no more than they need. So, coming back to the parking triangle idea, I just want to hit this again and maybe make it a little more digestible. When we talk about a system that has inexpensive and convenient parking, that's the hunting license idea. There's parking, and you can have it if you can find it. But you probably won't be able to over time as the inexpensiveness of parking encourages more people to drive. On the inexpensive but sufficient parking, that's where there's plenty of parking, but it's the spaces are going to be at the edge. And we have some of that now too, because all of the core spaces are full with people sort of hunting and pecking until they find a space, and whatever available spaces do tend to be out in the orange lot in the stadium, but as we know, there's not much of that. So this is all to be understood in the context of an acknowledged need for more parking. But finally, when you talk about convenient and sufficient parking, that would be more expensive. You can get convenient and efficient parking, but you're going to have to pay for it. So with that, let me just show you this graphic that's intended to clarify sort of the spectrum of parking policy and models. Start with the hunting license. It's inexpensive, inconvenient, but it's not sufficient. You're not there. It's what we have today. There's not enough parking. You can look for a space here in the core, and you're not going to find it. You're going to come all the way out here, and you're still not going to have a hard time finding it. That's what's behind the 25 minutes searching for a parking space problem. As you move to the right, you're introducing more elements of choice or assignment. In the second group, you're basically assigning people to facilities depending on who they are. In the third category, the reserved column, that's where if you want a guaranteed or more reliable parking space, you'll pay more for it. We have some of that here. It's resulting in people paying more for convenient parking. It's also resulting in some underused or spaces that are not available to the general public and are going empty. Finally, at the end what we're calling a zone system, which combines elements of the first two and takes it a bit further by subdividing the campus into zones. And so what you'll see along the bottom here is sort of a summary. With the first three, you've got that problem. You can have any two, but you can't have the third. The intention of the zone system is to allow people to choose where within the triangle they want to be, to enable you to get inexpensive, convenient, and or sufficient parking. You won't have all three to the degree that you might want, but this system provides the ability for people to decide which is most important to them, and that's what we keep coming back to. So if you're going to have a zone system or a system that in some way distinguishes more between users and facilities than they do now, you can do it on both sides. You can distinguish people by who they are, faculty, staff, residents, whatever. You can talk about sort of the terms of their employment, how long they've been there, how much they make, whether they're full-time or part-time. You can take these into account in a zone system in the way that you can't in the current system. On the facility side, you can charge more for the best parking and less for the less convenient parking. Or you can have reserved spaces, and we've got a blue square around that just to indicate that that's really the only element of this sort of choice model that UK is taking advantage of now. Finally, permits on sort of a campus policy level can take into account these larger goals of campus quality and traffic reduction, environmental sustainability, and generally encouraging alternatives to driving alone through the transportation demand management elements that I raised before. I'm going to keep going. There'll be plenty of time for discussion, and we can flip back to these slides as you need. Okay, now I said I wasn't going to tell you how much your parking is going to cost next year or even talk about that. But it is important, as we go through this, to take a nationwide look and understand where UK sits in the scheme of things as far as how much people pay for parking at comparable institutions across the country. I'm not going to make a lot of this. It's something that you just should all be aware of, that there are a lot of universities where people routinely pay a lot more for parking than you do here. I'm just going to leave it at that. It's true for employees, for resident students, and commuter students. But please don't focus on this too much because we have not made these decisions. We are not saying that the university is in a dire financial situation with regards to the traffic and parking division and or anything about an imminent need to greatly increase parking fees. We're here to talk about the larger structural questions. So one thing you can take out of the survey of pricing nationally is that in terms of policy, a lot of the universities, and including a lot of southern universities, do make this distinction between remote and proximate parking, or in different ways, charge for parking what the asset is worth to introduce that element of choice and let people park where they can best suit their own needs. As you see, there's a lot of universities that don't make that distinction, including Kentucky, but a lot that do. Okay, so with that kind of theoretical setup, I'm going to ask Margot here to lead us through a few case studies to see how it's done at other universities.
Thank you. So now we looked at the different types of allocation and pricing models, and so we'll now see how they were implemented on other campuses. So the first one that we looked at was University of Michigan, and they have a good example of a zone parking model. So on the left is the parking map, and I have a 10-minute walking circle around the campus core. So they have 4 different types of permits, and all represent a different zone. So the first, the blue parking is within the campus core, so within that 10-minute walking circle. And then within each of those blue parking options, there is the option to reserve a parking spot. So that's the gold stars that are represented on the map. The parking fees are represented on the bottom of the slide, and you can see that you pay premium to be closer to the campus, especially to have a reserved parking spot. The yellow and the orange spots permits are outside in the periphery of campus, and students and employees with the orange and yellow permit usually have to take a shuttle to get to the campus core. But at the same time, they pay much less for a parking permit a year. So this, as we talked about in the triangle, this gives option for people to whether they prioritize being closer to campus or if they want to pay less for parking. The next example was the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And what we chose to look at this example because their permit structure tries to reduce the parking demand and mitigate traffic congestion on campus. So they have, like this campus, just a base parking lot permit where people pay an annual fee. But what they offer that's different is this weekday flex permit. And these are represented in red on the map on the left. And these are available for commuters that usually use other modes of transportation, so either carpooling or walking or biking. And if they decide to drive, they have spots available in these lots. They don't pay an annual fee, they just pay an hourly fee with a cap that's $8 per day. The next type of permit is the carpool permit, and they see the same price as just a regular base lot permit. However, it's shared among the different riders. However, they get priority over the parking lot assignment. So that's kind of the incentive to carpool, as well as sharing the price of the permit. Then there's a series of park and ride options, which aren't shown on the map. There's one that's run by the university, and there's one that's run by Madison. The one run by university, the lots are about 2 to 3 miles away, and they're served by the shuttle. And you pay a low fee of $265 a year for that lot, which is much less compared to the other permits. The other park and ride lots are offered by the city, and these are further away from campus, but they're served by the Madison Transit, and these are free. So with that, you can reduce the amount of parking demand on campus, and University of Wisconsin has seen a lot of success in their weekday flex, and about 10% of all their employees hold this permit. The next case study was Stanford, and we thought this was a great example in terms of a TDM program. They've been very successful in reducing the amount of people driving alone to campus. And one of the successful parts of that program was this commute club, which basically rewards employees and students that do not drive to work alone. There's a series of rewards, but the main one is that they receive up to $300 a year. So the university pays people not to drive alone. And there's other incentives such as Zipcar credit. They are matched. There's services like the Stanford Ride Matching Services, which allows people to find other people to carpool with, and an emergency ride home program. So there's a series of incentives to help people choose not to drive alone. So the graph on the left shows kind of the savings that people can have with the program. So on the left is people just driving alone. They not only have to pay the permit price, they also lose that voucher, that $300 voucher. If they decide to carpool, they still have to pay the permit price, but they get the $300. And if you decide not to drive, you get to save on the permit price and gain the $300. So significant incentive for people not to drive. And this has been a successful program. Between 2002 to 2011, the percentage of people driving alone to campus dropped from 72% to 46%. And today, currently, the total drive alone rate for the university is about 38%.
Thank you. So that shows that there really is a lot of opportunity here to reduce parking demand, which of course will free up a lot of parking spaces for folks. Now we're going to talk about transit. What you see here is a map showing the density of student residences off campus. And if you overlay the LexTran system on that, you see that LexTran goes to most of these places, but you can't say that it provides really convenient service. There's a lot of very roundabout routes, so there's issues of travel time, both in terms of route structure and frequency. The bus tracking app really doesn't work nearly as well as UK's does, so you'll see we have a recommendation about that. And generally the rider experience. There are things that could be done to improve the quality of the buses themselves. So our recommendations are make the bus routes more efficient, integrate a high quality tracking app and integrate it with the CAT system. And we are looking, and the university has been looking since before we got involved, into an arrangement with LexTran that would provide some sort of vouchers to subsidize people's LexTran use, and then upgrading the bus fleet in a number of ways, and including putting bike racks on buses. That's always a good thing. So I'll just quickly run through some case studies on the transit side. Again, Stanford. The thing I want to focus on here, not to put too fine a point on it, is the ridership statistics. I'll flip through these. Stanford with 2/3 or a little bit more than 2/3 of your enrollment gets more than twice as many trips per day. University of Michigan, about 1/3 more students, but about 3 times, 4 times almost as many transit riders. University of Texas, twice as many students, 6 times as many passengers. So it just shows that campus transportation systems really can work, and every person you get on the shuttle bus is someone who's not driving around campus or who is not having to walk further than they want to. Now, there is an issue about the degree to which the campus shuttle system actually reduces parking need, and we're very aware of that. You know, getting more people on the buses doesn't necessarily mean that there's fewer people driving to campus, but it certainly helps, and it makes a lot of things possible that wouldn't be otherwise. Okay, one more. University of Wisconsin, great ridership. So, when it comes to CATS, we've got a couple of service recommendations. Consolidate the routes into a more simple system, and I'm about to show you that, and spacing bus stops a little better. Aligning CATS and LexTran bus stops so that the transfers are easier. Running more off hours, evening and weekend service, and it would be great if, and this is not a cheap thing, but if you can develop these nice parking bus shelters with real-time bus arrival information, then you've really done something. It radically increases the utility of transit for folks. So now let's talk about the route system. Here's your existing system. A lot of buses running a lot of places, and as we pointed out last time, it's the blue and the yellow routes that really aren't pulling their weight in terms of ridership. So we took all of this information about ridership, about people's needs and desires, and put it to the idea of developing a streamlined, simpler, but more frequent bus service. The idea is, as a sort of skeleton, as the basic route structure, to run buses from the stadium area around a loop that brings you to the corner of Rose and Columbia, and then out onto Avenue of Champions and back around Limestone, over on Cooper, not using Huguelit, which is just too jammed up, but providing everybody pretty direct access to all points of the campus. The stops would be consolidated. These aren't hard and fast recommendations, but they're intended to show the idea of making the stops far enough apart so that service can move rapidly. Now, we could dress the system up with a few bells and whistles, a route that specifically serves Greg Page, some version of the health center shuttle. This is not to suggest that the shuttle is going to be diminished in any way, but we need to find a way to keep that direct service for you folks here. And then what about the idea of a little trolley, a smaller vehicle going up and down rows all day long? These are things that are optional add-ons, but what we want to suggest to you today is that the system can be greatly simplified, and the more buses you've got running on a single route, the better the service is. This way, people will have more frequent buses, and we really think that will serve to start to get that ridership up into the league of the other universities we looked at. Just a note about the spacing of bus stops. As we've said before, 2 to 4 minutes would be a good standard for the maximum distance that people should have to walk to a bus, and this system does that. So, just to wrap up, we showed these goals before. I just want to remind you of sort of what's guiding us. And then, here's the punchline. What we would like to suggest at this point as a high-level policy recommendation is that the parking permit system should be redesigned to give more choice options with regard to price and location. So all of those things I was talking about, allowing people to choose a parking space that is more convenient if they're willing to pay for it, cheaper if they're willing to take the bus, that does take into account people's hours and conditions and status of work, and that basically elaborates the system so that there's something for everyone. And that's a big part of the system, of the solution, but it's not the whole solution, because as we've said before, you just don't have enough parking. So there's 2 prongs to this parking approach: to provide more choice and to provide more parking so that people have the ability to park where they want to and know that they're going to get parking there. So it means both creating new parking with the cost that entails. A garage space costs $25,000. Multiply that times 500, and you see what a major investment that is for the university. And when we're creating new parking, on behalf of the master plan and the quality of the campus and just the legacy of this great institution, we will insist, as any other consultant you talk to will, that you must not compromise the quality of this great campus by paving over open spaces and building garages in the core. We remain, and I hope you remain, committed to a pedestrian campus, and that does mean putting some amount of the parking, a large amount of the parking, on the periphery. It's the choice and zone system that enables people to, if they really want to park in the core and are willing to pay for it, to do it. But that parking is more expensive to the university, so it needs to be more expensive to the user. Okay, so that's the supply side. On the demand side, the university community, all of you, must make a commitment not to drive to work any more than you have to. And we're committed to finding a whole great array of options. But that is the other part of that supply-demand equation. And then, on the transit side, we think the transit routes should be restructured to allow more frequent and predictable service by simplifying it to a single route. So that is the conclusion. I'll open it up for discussion now. We've got more than half an hour, so have at it. Now, we are live streaming, so I guess we need people to come up and speak into the microphones, right? So anybody with something to say, come up to one of the microphones. And yes, if you can't make it to the microphone, we can bring it to you, but this is how it's set up.
Yes, I had a question. Has the university looked at paying for parking the way the city does it in a tone ticket system, in that they could pay more, it could be set up that they pay more up the closer they are to their destination than parking farther away, and if they lose their token or their card, they just have to pay a flat fee when they leave? Has that been looked at, the way the city does their parking?
It sounds like there's two elements of that. One is the sort of pay for convenience element, and that's what we're recommending here. And then the other is about sort of the mechanics of how you pay as you leave the facility.
Yes, you get something as you enter the parking system, and then you have it swiped or deposited as you leave, so that you're paying for your time versus.
Well, that would be a good mechanism for that occasional parking permit for the people who want to save money by only sort of paying as they go. That would be a great way to do it. I'm sure there's other technologies, but that would be definitely part of the mix, yeah.
Andy, first of all, thank you for coming last time and this time, and at least opening up possibilities for us and considering what's going on, because it never hurts to have an outside voice or opinion. As far as my specific situation would be with the CATS route, the modifications that you're making to that, it appears from what I remember of the map that it's basically, yes, the farther southern area for the route will be Cooper Drive. You have to remember, though, that on the west side of Nicholasville, anywhere from Westwood, Sioux Road, Dantzler, Barberry, Arcadia Park, Cherokee Park is a very, very large contingent of students who now will have a fairly significant walk to get to Cooper if you want them to ride the shuttle. Mm-hmm. So I would try to impress upon you, while I understand that you want to have a central route, perhaps it could be extended, although perhaps that's defeating what your purpose of it is. There's always room for compromise.
It's a trade-off.
In addition to that, what were the responses in the survey to the service provided by the CATS route?
Okay, the first question, I guess I'll say, as you pointed out, it is a matter of sort of balancing the efficiency with the breadth of service. And I think this is intended really to be that sort of skeleton idea, a sort of concept for efficient service. I think it's inevitable that over time there will be elaborations and that certain particular markets will be served. I guess what this suggests to me is that you start out with a system that the university can run with its current resources, that provides the best service to the largest number of people, and then as you respond to the needs of particular markets or geographical segments, that those new services should be evaluated sort of on their own merits in terms of costs and benefits. So that you might say, yeah, we'd love to run a bus to Cherokee Town, but how are we going to pay for that? And you do that without compromising the quality of the main system.
Right, and on the other side, if you run it as far, let's say, Cherokee Park may be too far, but if you were to run it that far, that's so many more permits you're no longer selling,
Certainly.
people no longer driving onto campus and taking up spaces.
Right.
So there's, of course, a trade-off, and
Yeah.
it's what
Yeah.
we're looking for. Nevertheless, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a similar question about remote lots and exploring maybe some that are even further than the last gentleman mentioned. UK has recently acquired the Turfland Mall location, and that might be a possibility for a lot where people could park who live further away from campus, whether they are students or employees, and then ride a shuttle in. And then there are already existing routes with LexTran and that are already there on Harrodsburg Road, for example. So are you looking at that? And my concern is with the survey, with that in mind, when I filled that out, there was a question about, it might have been question 9 about what was most important to you, but when you consider being close and convenience, that might be confused a bit in terms of, if you had a remote lot that took a 10-minute shuttle to get in, and it's taking you the same amount of time, let's say, as a walk, a 10-minute walk where you're located close, my concern is the survey may not reflect that if we weren't considering remote lots to begin with.
Yes. Well, the survey may not have been worded quite as precisely as it should have been for those purposes, but from the verbal responses and from what we saw in the statistics, we did get a clear message that park and ride would be a popular option. So, yeah, it's definitely on the table. And, like I say, we're talking at a very high level here. Over the next couple of months, with regard both to parking and transit, we will be refining these recommendations. And I think that's when we'll be able to get into identifying particular opportunities. People mentioned a couple of points off of I-71, is it? 2, 4, 5? Sorry. And so, yeah, I mean, in the comments I read, there were some good suggestions about parking ride, and I think we need to lay them out on the map. And of course, the question is, you have to locate it in a place that really makes it worth people driving, stopping, waiting for a bus, driving to campus, taking the bus to campus, and then walking. It adds an element. But in that regard, it's the same as parking at the stadium and having to take a bus.
Exactly.
And you just have to balance those travel times.
Thank you.
Thank you again for providing this forum for us. It's nice to be able to listen and see what other people feel about the situation. My question is, at a lot of other universities, sophomore and freshmen are not allowed to park core camping or core campus, and they take up a lot of space. Why is it not an option for those students who live on campus, who shouldn't be driving day to day anyway, to park far away? They only go to their car maybe once a week. Provide spots maybe for juniors, seniors, upper level, maybe honor students, things like that. But all of these residential halls that are being built, they're providing all these spots for these lower level students that should, personally, I think should be reserved for upper level students and employees.
Well, that's a very good point. Two good points, actually. The two parts are parking resident students remotely, and you said at the beginning prohibiting freshmen and or sophomores from bringing cars. A lot of universities do that, and so we're aware of that. I think we want to craft something that is acceptable to the campus community and that is in keeping with your traditions of equity and basically providing people incentives rather than rules and mandates and so forth. So that's but it's a very good point. It's a very important part of parking management is just determining who's eligible to park in the first place. On the side of parking resident students remotely, that is something that I endorse unambiguously. Say at every university we go to. There's really no reason why people in residence halls have to have their cars parked outside the dorm. And I think the model should be that resident students should think of their cars as being in storage. if this transit system works for everybody else, it'll work for the residents, all students, and they can take a 10-minute bus to get their car anytime. I think you can be sure that that will be part of our recommendations, that we think about the parking supply in terms of who's using the parking and where do they need to be and where their cars need to be. So, yeah, that's a very good point.
Thank you.
I apologize, I don't want to monopolize, but I was wondering, in your proposed loss or gain of parking spaces, if you were aware of the fact that the university announced last week that they have received money from the state in order to begin construction upon the new research building on Virginia Avenue.
Yes.
And so you included those parking spaces as potentially to be lost?
Yes, yeah, those are in that estimate of displaced spaces on the supply
All
side.
right,
So,
super.
yeah.
Maybe I'd be so bold as to ask, is there a plan in place for those spaces? If this construction
I
begins
have to
this
turn to
year,
Lance.
there are, I don't know, what, 400 or 500 places are going to disappear. Is there a plan in place, or?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. First, there's the transportation master plan study that's ongoing that's going to be addressing, the global long-term issues. But that doesn't mean that we're within parking and transportation services in the university are sitting idle and not looking ahead in the short term. So certainly that's something that's of a concern for us. But just to give you a sense of where we're headed, we anticipate there still seems to be a little bit of uncertainty as to when we go into groundbreaking for that facility, but it looks to be sometime. I think the newspaper originally quoted the university of saying somewhere in this calendar year, but I think it's probably more realistic. And again, this is nothing official, but just what I've been hearing, that it's probably further into 2016 and maybe during the off-peak time, so after spring break-ish, somewhere in that vicinity. We anticipate it'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 lost spaces, so we're not losing everything on that side of the street, but right now we're anticipating about 300. So just to give you a sense of what's coming this summer, and Andy showed a slide that kind of referenced a little bit of this, but we're anticipating, and his slide referenced fiscal years, so I'm thinking in terms of getting ready for fall semester. So between now and fall semester, we anticipate that we're expecting to lose about 975 spaces between now and the fall semester. The good news is that if you look at Andy's slide, the flip side of that is we're also anticipating adding about 1,571 spaces between now and then. So our net gain is about 600. So if you think about the current situation and the demand for parking, and overlay that with what's to come between now and fall semester, we anticipate being to the good by about 600 parking spaces. So depending on, and that's just for this year. So then as we look forward to the future year, we also have a few parking projects that we're looking at in order to offset some of that loss as well. So our goal right now is to make sure that we're balancing the supply and demand, and that's been kind of our marching orders to make sure that even in the existing scenario that people can find a place to park.
All right, but you don't have a specific response to that at this time, so no problem.
Well, I mean, it's not necessarily
In other words, you can't say, well, at this location, there's going to be something.
correct.
I
It's
understand.
not. We don't necessarily look at it on a micro level that way. Like if we take 300 out here, we're going to add 300 here. We're looking more globally. So, and given our current parking scenario, sometimes we'll lose parking on one end of campus, which then has a domino effect because the people that park in that quadrant of campus don't necessarily all work in that area. It just is most convenient for their commute. So sometimes you never know what's going to happen when you lose parking in one area. And the same thing is true when you add parking in another area. So even if we don't add 300 spaces there, if we add 300 spaces, perhaps in the stadium area, and then run a better, more robust transit system from the stadium that accesses that area, you can accomplish the same thing with parking just in a different area.
Sure.
Hi, thanks for coming down, and thanks for the presentation. I had a quick question, I guess, about the use of bicycles. I noticed in your presentation as alternative transportation, your first mention of a bicycle was that we should put bike racks on the front of Lextran buses, but there wasn't really any exposure in this presentation about how to do it. Are you planning on programs like CiviBike or City Bike stations, pay docks to provide that incremental transportation between your parking garages or lots and the destinations where people are supposed to get?
It certainly is on the table, and I apologize for not saying more about bicycling because it is an important element, and we we definitely want to be part of the TDM picture. The bike share idea that you're talking about is really picking up steam, and I would encourage the university to look at that. We'll dig into some good case studies for, it's done at the municipal level, but it's also done at the university level. So yeah, very good point. We should be doing that.
Thank you.
With parking being done away with in the middle of campus, this survey doesn't address what the parking plan is in that direction. There's the red route, there's the blue route that is not addressed in this survey, just the CATS route. How does the university plan to address the parking going away in the middle of campus?
Well, we're not losing any particular identified spaces in the core, I don't think. Yeah. I mean, this whole presentation has been about how to sort of allocate the existing supply and make it work better. But of the spaces that are being displaced, I don't think any are, between the library and Limestone.
Well, it was my understanding that there were a couple of lots being done away with in the middle of campus, because that was the direction other universities were going for.
Oh, no. I'm certainly not talking about, I don't think I did, but if I said anything about sort of maybe pushing people to the periphery, that is not about removing parking. It's about giving people an attractive alternative at the periphery so that if they don't want to pay for parking in the core, they can go directly to where they do have permits.
Okay. And someone's wanting to know about summer conferencing parking. What will be the options for that?
For what?
Summer conferencing.
Summer conference parking? Well, that's kind of a detail. I guess maybe, Lance, you have something to say?
It depends on where in specific we're talking about. Right now, most of our conferences occur either, in the northern section focused around the student center, which in the summer we have availability in parking structure 5, the Limestone. That doesn't change. And then on South Campus, we've been focusing most of the camps and summer conferences that are more student focused, using the Sports Center garage as the available parking for that group.
Well, thank you all for your input. This is really, I have to say, this has been a very, I think, well-run process by the university. We were called in, given a lot of very useful and relevant information to work with. At the same time, the university has, through these forums and through the open comment process, really engaged the university community. So I feel quite confident that we have a good reading of the opinions and options and opportunities to really make some big changes here. The changes may be incremental, but as we've shown in this presentation and the previous one, we recognize that there are some big changes needed, and that there's an opportunity to really make parking work better for people. And we do think that really comes down to having something for everyone, improving the transit system so that if you choose to save money by parking out at the stadium, that still is a reliable and predictable alternative to get you to and fro, and that with all of the transportation demand management efforts that you all can muster, that the campus will become a better place and a healthier place. Bicycling and walking are all, sort of win-win propositions in terms of parking demand and personal health. So that's been our perspective on this, and I think we're headed in the right direction here, and I hope you agree. So thanks for coming. We're having another presentation this afternoon at 1. And where is that? In the Student Center? 203. So if you want to do a double header, feel free. And we thank you for coming.